I am so excited to be here. Haley Prophet. I don't even know where to begin because my passion for these topics is so great. I've been blessed to work in corporate well-being for so long, but I look at that journey over time, and talking mental health is so important. So I'm excited to be here. I'm honored and proud to serve as board secretary, incoming chair soon, later this year with For the Kids Foundation. And this is going to be such a meaningful conversation. So
yeah, Haley, and we're so happy to have you, and we're so happy you're leapfrogging the vice chair to be the chair this October. But there's more to you than just this. I mean, you have two beautiful kids, and tell everyone a little bit about your work history and all that. I know you're interviewing me, but I think people want to know about you.
Yeah, well, we all have unique journeys, and sometimes we don't embrace them ourselves. And I certainly have to step back and remember my journey is just as unique as the next. Like I said, I've been in corporate well-being so long. It's what my degree is in. I'm blessed to be able to do the work to empower individuals to be well in order to thrive, and then elevate that conversation in a workplace. We spend more time with colleagues, peers, and our work environment and the work we do. How do we cohesively have these meaningful conversations? And we should be having these. And so, as I think about my career beginning and my enthusiasm and my experience, and then motherhood, and then moving all over the country, I've lived in a handful of states, and what that journey is like, what I am able to take away from every experience, that is who I am today and what I value most. And I talk a lot about, there are some of my non-negotiables in life, and how do I set myself up to be my best self and ask for help and be really authentic in the way that I lead personally and professionally.
Well, I don't know if thousands of people relied on you, but I think in a way they did. At Garmin for years, you were the wellness director, and you had a tremendous impact on many people and many different systems and priorities for the company, and you should be applauded for that. And partly because of that, we're really proud to have you. And we're proud that you're going to be leading our organization for the next couple of years.
It's mutual pride in what we're accomplishing for the communities we live in and love.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, your stake in this world.
Well, I'm Kevin Timmons. I'm one of the owners of Nick and Jake's, and Nick and Jake's were named after my son, Nick, and my partner's son, Jake. We opened in Kansas City almost 22 years ago, and we came out of the chutes pretty hot. We were a pretty hot restaurant in a pretty hot part of town, and we've been extremely lucky. We've been extremely successful, and we've worked extremely hard. It didn't take us very long to start building a set of bar regulars who encouraged us to have a golf tournament. And 20 years ago this year, we did our first For the Kids golf tournament. And believe it or not, I flip burgers for a living, so FORE, the kids, was an easy acronym for what we were trying to do. We're trying to do something for the kids. And our tagline back then was really just to put a smile on a kid's face.
Sure.
We started that tournament not selling out and raising about $10,000 or $15,000. I think the money went to the Sunflower House, which is just an awesome organization in town for kids. We stayed with them for a couple years, and then we kind of moved it around to other kids' organizations. The tournament grew, and we got to the point where we sold out every time, and we had a party at Nick and Jake's afterwards. For many, it was more about the party afterwards than it was about the golf. And we started doing an auction, and then when you do a live auction and you get the right people, you just start raising more money. My daughter and I went to go visit the Paydens at Children's Mercy Hospital in the 2007, 2008. And we were visiting their daughter Jordan, and she was in and out for long stints trying to figure out what was wrong, and it turned out to be Crohn's disease, which is a disease that's hard to detect, I guess, or hard to identify. But through the couple visits that we had there, the walls were colorful. One of the nurses was wearing a clown outfit. The windows were open. I mean, there was bright light. It didn't feel like a hospital. And we got to talking to the nurses and getting to know them a little bit. And I asked them a question. I said, hey, we have a golf tournament and we're looking to change where we're spending the money. What can we do for you? And they came back a week later and they said, well, we need an incubator and we need a radiographer, something kind of a technological device and so forth. And I said, we want to put smiles on kids' faces. What can we do? And together, the hospital and us, we decided to start buying laptops. This was before iPads. So we bought Panasonic rough books, I think they were called. And these were the laptops that the police use, the military use. They're very durable. You can actually spray them and sanitize them. And we bought 5 of those. They were $3,500 a piece. We bought 5 of those that next tournament and presented them to the hospital. Now, what does a laptop mean for a kid, and how does it put a smile on a kid's face? Well, my daughter Jennifer, who was in high school at the time, negotiated with a company called Blockbuster Video, if you remember that one. And she negotiated a couple hundred kids' movies that for whatever was left over in our account, we'd make sure went to all the kids. So we had, an odd number, $400 or $500 after the laptops were spent. And so we showed up with a whole bunch of kids' movies. So kids then could, they could watch movies. They can play games. They could do homework. Parents could use those as lifelines to the outside world on carrying bridges and so forth, on how their kids were doing. Sure. And, subsequently we did it again the following year, and we maybe bought 10 of them. Then the following year, a guy named Steve Jobs came out with a device called an iPad, and they were a lot less expensive, and they were easy to clean, easy to manage, and we were able to mount them to beds. And so in 2009, we started the laptop craze, and then by 2011, 2012, we were in iPads, and we kept on that until every single bed at Children's Mercy Hospital had one. And you got to keep in mind, children's one of our loves is they take everyone. Yeah. Insurance, no insurance, not enough insurance. They take every family. So every family didn't have access to an iPad or a laptop back then. And, it got to the point where doctors were, with the iPad, they'd flip the iPad around and show the child a little bit about, what procedure they're going to have next and how simple it is, right, and not worry about it. And then able to describe using the iPad to parents some of the things that were the procedures that were going to happen. So, about 2011, 2010, Dan Beitler and George Shaw Construction joined the team. And with Dan, that also brought Tom Watson to the team. So Dan is a big Children's Mercy guy. And Tom Watson's bronze statue is in front of Children's Mercy Hospital. And at that point, we weren't going to start changing around anymore. I think we had made our commitment, and we decided, at that point, we're going to be a pass-through organization for children's. We didn't call it that, and only recently now are we calling it that, but that's truly what we were. We bought a couple of golden retrievers and a $100,000 endowment. We had a canine therapy program where there was a story about a young boy who had to get a dialysis, and the dog was there with him, and he didn't want to leave the dog, but he went to go get the dialysis, and he came back, and the dog was still on the bed waiting for him when he got back. So, still putting smiles on kids' faces. Yeah. We ended up asking them, as we started raising more and more money, over $100,000 a year, what else could we do? And they're now starting to build these more remote clinics, and they were building one right behind Nick and Jake's in Overland Park. And how can we help? Well, we helped fund a lot of the equipment in that clinic and getting it open. We did hard hat tours with them, and and it's been a blessing to South Johnson County. That sports clinic has really been a blessing. And it's open 7 days a week. It's phenomenal. The big push, though, came when we said, what else can we do? And they said, we need an ambulance. We need a critical care ambulance. And we're like, okay. I mean, I just bought an SUV for $25,000, $30,000. How much can an ambulance be? Well, their critical care units are $300,000. And when you think about it, if they're going to go to Jefferson City and pick up a child, they're also going to pick up maybe a mom or a dad or both.
Right.
There's going to be a driver, a doctor, and an RN on board. I mean, these are really big units. So we needed to raise $300,000, and we raised $320,000 that year, which more than doubled anything we had ever done before.
Yeah, that's great.
And then the following year, they're like, our ambulance fleet is still our biggest need. At the time, I think they had 5 ambulances, and the newest one had over 280,000 miles on it. So we were, okay, we'll get you another one. And then we challenged ourselves to get 2. So, we went from never getting close to 300. Then now we're at 600,000. Sure. We challenged the car dealers in Kansas City we challenged them to come up with some help, and they came through big. The automobile dealers of Kansas City, really every dealership chipped in, and when they all chip in, great things happen. So we got that second ambulance. So that was around 2016, 2017 when that happened, and then the worst thing. And the worst thing that could ever happened in June of 2017, and we lost Nick to suicide. He was 22 years old, and he was the light of our life. He was the class clown. He was the Peter Pan to a bunch of his kid friends, his high school friends. He didn't have it easy, and we knew he had mental health issues. We knew he had mental health issues in high school, and it was ADHD. It was things like that, which you never think something like that is going to translate to suicide. And through high school, we'd go to different doctors, and it seemed more about med management than it was really about pulling the onion back and seeing what was inside. Yeah. We had seen signs of depression and anger, but it was really more his focus was what we thought the main problem was the ADHD. So, Nick...
we have to pause. We have to honor Nick. We have to recognize you were doing this work. You were raising these funds. You were on this path and helping the community and making significant impact. And then the worst nightmare of any parent, and you guys are living this in June. How did that change the conversation with For the Kids in this tournament?
Well, my business partner, Nick and Jake's, in one conversation, and then Dan and his wife, Jo Beitler, in another conversation, both said the same thing. Maybe we just take a year off, or we don't do the tournament anymore. And maybe it's run its course. And we thought maybe that might be the way it went. But as a little bit of time elapsed, and I got to see what was going on in the community, Nick was the 6th death and suicide just in our church.
Wow.
In 6 weeks.
Wow.
So Church of the Resurrection had 6 suicides in 6 weeks. And Pastor Hamilton and one of his senior pastors, Karen Lampy, they formed a grief group because there were a lot of people that were struggling. And it was specifically a suicide grief group. A lot of churches, and there's a lot of grief organizations in town. This was strictly the suicide. And, as I got to hear more about people's stories and how hard it was, and that mental health wasn't getting the kind of, it wasn't as important.
Attention.
The
It
attention. It wasn't,
Again,
people
the
didn't know where to
stigma.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a stigma, but parents didn't know
Yeah.
what to do, just like us.
Right.
And then at some point, we just woke up and said, hey, we're doing the golf tournament.
Yeah.
Are we going to stay with Children's Mercy Hospital? I don't know. But it didn't take long for us to find out that Children's Mercy is very well aware of what's going on in the community.
Absolutely.
And Children's Mercy is completely kind of redrew their compass, and they were leaning into mental health. And, it was an unfortunate set of circumstances, but we continued on as just great partners. Right. There were other organizations that were further ahead than Children's, I think. Maybe some hospital organizations, but there were other organizations in town that probably the money could have been siphoned more directly to kids a little bit quicker. But nevertheless, Children's is methodical in the way they do their business. And the last 5.5 years, I think For the Kids has had a small impact on how they've changed their strategic plan.
I wouldn't say small. You guys have significantly, intentionally been focused on what you're providing to them. And, I can't sit here and speak on behalf of Children's, but I would say Children's Mercy would sit in this room with you, Kevin Timmons, and say between your work, the foundation's work, everything with the tournament and the funds you've raised, that has changed the trajectory and the velocity in which they are addressing mental health more quickly. So you've got to recognize you absolutely have had a piece in that giant puzzle of mental health with our kids in this community. And so kudos to you. Kudos to us for continuing it.
Yes.
But
yes. Well, thank you for that. But the team, sometimes a team needs something to rally around, and certainly losing Nick gave us something to rally around. It wasn't just Kevin Timmons,
sure,
Ann Timmons, and Jen Timmons. It was
having the purpose.
It was the whole team of For the Kids. And at that point, I think we might have had bylaws written at that point, and we might have been an official foundation. And I assume I was in charge of it.
Loosely formed, anyway.
And we never had meetings. We'd have breakfast. We did all these golf tournaments without really having any meetings. And
make it sound easy.
But we'd sit around on our cell phones, and somebody's working on silent
somewhere.
auction items, and somebody's working on getting the word out. We need more registrants, and somebody's working on who's buying the sweatshirts for the prizes and all that. And it would happen just over coffee, and then all of a sudden 9 o'clock came, and we all scattered to our jobs in the morning. So the bottom line is, though, that Children's Mercy not only leaned into it, but they started motivating us a little bit. They brought they provided 19 social workers to the Blue Valley School District. And I think at one point, I think Blue Valley School District might have been ground zero, or at least Johnson County, I think might have been ground zero, at least in Kansas City area, for this problem. And the social workers from Children's played a significant role. I mean, there were, I think that first year, there were almost 750 situations that were interventions. So 744, if you want to know the exact number. So where was our money going? Well, it was going to help pay for that. It was going to help adding support to the Children's Mercy South Campus. It helped bringing on a couple of new psychiatrists. But we were also, Children's Mercy was also saving the money and creating an endowed professorship position, which, I think it was a 1 point something million dollars that they needed to start this professorship. But it was a mental health professorship. And they found a gem in Dr. Sarah Soden, absolute gem.
Shout out to Dr. Soden.
Wow.
Her passion, her perseverance, her willingness to step forth and be on this journey with us.
Yeah. Well, and you probably know more about it than me, but an endowed professorship gives the hospital an opportunity to go out and get more grant money, not just locally or nationally, but even internationally, to help support that mission, that endowment. So I think it's a 10-year endowment, I believe. But Dr. Soden, in conjunction with the board, not our board, but the children's board, and Paul Kay, the CEO, kind of helped redefine Children's Mercy's. I should know how many years they've been open. It's over 100 years, but never has their strategic plan had mental health as one of the main 4 or 5 pillars.
Yeah, exactly.
And now mental health is a pillar of Children's Mercy strategic plan.
It's a lot of forward thinking to be able to step forward at that level within board and leadership and say, not only do we see it, we want to do something about it.
Yeah.
And that's how that's really setting it apart.
Yeah. Well, the For the Kids is an organization that we now have a more formalized board. We ended up hiring, stealing, I should say, one of my closest friends, Tracy McDonald. And Tracy Tracy lived right across the street from us and knew Nick while he was growing up. So not only is she an expert at community events, not only is she an expert at golf and plays golf herself, but she also understands what we've gone through, and she knew Nick, and the passion is there.
Yeah.
So there couldn't have been a better person to hire for this position as executive director. And she's been a lightning rod for us as we've slowly started to formalize this. But For the Kids has gone from putting smiles on kids' faces to encouraging them to live.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. So that's the tagline: encourage to live. I mean, when we get down to brass tacks, that's the focus. How do you live? How do you encourage that in and of yourself? How do you model it? What are you doing now at this time? What have you learned for yourself?
Well, it's hard. It's every day is every week and every year is just different. The amount when you lose someone so unexpectedly, and you feel like you're carrying some of that weight of what could have I have done different, and that's going to be the same. People are going to have that same feeling no matter how anyone dies.
Sure. Sure. It's grief. You're dealing with a lot.
If it's a heart attack, what could I have done differently that might have helped them not have a heart attack? Well, the problem with our case is that we saw signs in him not having good mental health, and we just didn't take care of it. And so as a parent, you carry that with you. And that weight creates different levels of feelings from day to day, even from hour to hour. I mean, sometimes I'm really upset at him, and then sometimes I am so sad that I wasn't there to help him.
Sure.
And then when you start getting into the community, you start having even more feelings about other people that will call and say, hey, I'm having a problem with my son or my daughter. Who do you recommend we call? What do you recommend we do?
Let's walk through that day, June 14th, 2017. Walk me through what that experience was like.
Well, I was already at work. It was about 8:30 in the morning, and Nick was living with my ex-wife at the time, and just a couple miles from Nick and Jake's. And she called me and told me that he had a belt around his neck and that he had taken his life. So immediately rushing over there. Police are there, ambulances are there. There was nothing they could do. And after we pushed Nick into the coroner's cab, I got in my car and got a call, and it was Adam Hamilton, and who was traveling. I think he might have even been overseas, but someone had gotten word to him during that hour and a half, 2 hours of what happened. And he had immediately called Karen Lampy and one of the senior pastors and had her go directly to our house. And he told me that she's on her way there. And I said, I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't know how I can do this. And he says, you're going to need to. And sure enough, she was there waiting on us, pulled the family together. She said she said a few prayers and then talked about how we need to open ourselves and open our house to Nick's friends, to our friends. And I said, I just want to go back in the closet. And I just want to go back in the closet and lock it and not come out. She says, Kevin, I don't want you to do that. You can't do it. She left after about 20 minutes, and when we walked her to the door, there was about 150 people in our driveway. So we had to take a moment and regroup, and then welcome people into our house. And they needed to grieve as well as we needed to grieve. At that time, I had only heard about some suicides. I didn't realize it was as big a thing as it was. But that encouraging to share, that encouragement for us to share from Karen was one of the most important things that ever happened to me. So, here we are.
And thank you for sharing. It's got to be the hardest story of your lifetime to have to repeat and share, but it's part of the legacy too.
Yeah, it is, and I don't tell that part of the story very often.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, I don't want people to feel like I did that day. And there's so much that is now. There's so much pressure on kids, on middle schoolers and high schoolers. There's so much pressure on people in their 20s and their 30s, and marriage and work and the economy and the world. And there's so much pressure on our veterans. I mean, suicide is just finding different people to, there's so many different things that go into it. And it starts here.
Right.
And it starts here. And part of it is your physical and mental health being on the same page, your sleep, your openness, your listening.
And willing to talk about it, willing to address it, having a safe relationship to be able to truly be vulnerable if you're struggling, to ask questions. We're still fighting a stigma even now on bringing it up, talking about it. Who can I share it with? And so that's always something, to improve upon. But talking about the physical health, so I know we've had lots of conversations around our passion behind the importance of mental health, and that can mean something very different for everyone, but where we are certainly so aligned is that the discussion around physical health and being preventative and proactive when it comes to cancer screenings, and you've got a broken bone, let's fix it. You need a surgery, let's do it. You can see those things. They're happening. You can have empathy for individuals in that scenario. That's not the case with mental health. You might not see it. You may see it and not know what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I have very similar feelings on this, and I think we've shared them with you. And my wife Annie has shared them on panels before. She does more speaking than I do on this. But mental health should be probably more ingrained in school. We have
Right.
physical
Absolutely.
PE, physical education, and there ought to be mental education.
Right.
And it could be subtle for most. Annie says that if she had to do it all over again, when her kids finished with their pediatrician, and whatever age that is, 11, 12, 13 years old, where you went for your annual pediatric checkup, that she would have immediately pivoted and had the kids with a mental health professional. Just an annual checkup.
Right.
And it would have done two things. Maybe it would have helped and been more proactive with the kids. And then the second thing is, if there ever was a flare-up or there ever was a problem, there's already a relationship that's built between a doctor or a therapist and a child, and that happens. Annie did a tremendous job in getting our two youngest girls immediately into therapy because they couldn't understand it. Nick was their guy.
Right.
He's their big brother. He was the guy that just loved to swim with them and play with them and just play music and all the stuff. And she immediately got him into therapy, and that was an
huge.
important thing. As we kind of start wrapping this up, I want to just tell you that we got involved in these grief groups, and we still talk to some grief groups. Annie and I talked to a group at St. Paul's Methodist this last Sunday night. There were 25 folks there that had lost people recently to suicide or other unexpected death. And, we told them that it's important to grieve. It's important to walk towards it. It's important to walk into it.
Yeah.
To hold hands and just walk through it. Don't get in the middle of not feeling great, or don't get in the middle of grief and think that if you don't change, it's going to change. You're to change. So, but what we both wanted to do was to not be reactive, but to really be more proactive. And the board, the donors, and there's some really incredible donors that have been with us for all 20 years. And the Friends of For the Kids, along with Children's Mercy Hospital, has really put, I think, mental health in a much better light.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know that as these podcasts continue, more will be heard about the depression and anxiety clinic for youth. But I think that is probably one of our most proudest moments is this now being a reality.
A step in the right direction. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I love the phrase, without change, you can't have growth. And without growth, you can't have change. What is one thing you want to leave us with that you want to see grow with any of this, whether it be For the Kids Foundation, mental health in our community?
Well, there's still a stigma, but I don't think it's like it was. And I even struggle with it in my house, communicating with kids, parents really communicating with their kids, and kids communicating back. Parents complain. Those parents that complain that their kids are on their phone all the time or in their room by themselves all the time, some of them have to look in the mirror and ask, what are they doing?
Yeah, 100%. Adults are guilty too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're the amount of pressure kids feel through social media and through their technology is just enormous. And to unlock that and have discussions about that are important. And then knowing now that there's more therapy available is something I really look forward to, and that's what we're fighting for.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable, sharing your story, and willing to just sit down and have this important conversation.
Well, Haley, thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done. This has been a hard moment, but I think it's an important moment.
It's been amazing, and we're here to encourage kids to live.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.